All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes Live. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. We are 25 days away from Texas football, 25 days away from the big opening weekend of college football. I think there's some games the weekend before, maybe the week leading up, but the big one we're all looking for, 25 days out. And I guess technically right now it's 24 days out for all games that start before 7 p.m. Central Time. Every time I see 25 and we're talking about football, I can't help but think about Jamal Charles. It just some of the amazing runs Jamal Charles had at the University of Texas. Just some of what a gamer that dude was. Came in as a freshman, absolute track star, right? But a lot of people weren't sure how well he was going to do on the big stage, and I think like his second game of his college career, he's got to go play in the shoe. It's a big lick on AJ Hawk on an interception. I think my favorite Jamal Charles moment probably, though, is the damn near 300 yards he put up against Nebraska in 2007. 213 of which came in the fourth quarter of that game. Stud. Jamal Charles, number 25. We got 3 more Saturdays till college football, major college football, Texas college football. It's the only one I care about. Got a really cool show today. We're going to talk about Colin Simmons' announcement, his recruitment. Just the world's going wild about Colin Simmons right now. Rightfully so. That's a big-time prospect. We're going to talk about some of the storylines surrounding conference realignment. And then we'll just talk a little bit about the preseason coaches poll. The top 25 just came out, I believe, on Monday. Before we get into that, check us out on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all at Horn Takes. Search for Horn Takes. You'll find us. By the way, the streaming service I use says I can stream to Twitter. So I turned that on for this show. I have no idea how that's going to work. I didn't think you could stream live to Twitter. I have no idea what's going to happen with that. So if you're checking this out on Twitter, give me a chat or something. Let me know what it's like. I have no idea. Maybe it just tells people that I'm going live on other platforms. I have no idea. Anyway, Colin Simmons' announcement. So if you don't know who Colin Simmons is, you probably don't follow college sports whatsoever at all. He's a 5-star edge out of Duncanville, Texas, the number 1 edge in the country. 6'3", 6'4", 225 pounds. He's been starting at Duncanville High School, who's a perennial powerhouse in the DFW area, really across the state in 6A football. Biggest classification you can play in Texas in high school. He's been starting since he was a sophomore at least for Duncanville High School. And Duncanville High School puts out a lot of prospects. There's a lot of kids in the last few years from Duncanville that have gone on to play at some really major D1 universities. And he's been hanging with those types of players. I think he's been to 2 straight state championship games. If he started as a freshman or played as a freshman, he's been to 3 straight state championship games. Elite athlete, lots of speed, just a really I talked about him earlier this year, and I mentioned Jadeveon Clowney. I don't know if he's Jadeveon Clowney, like South Carolina Jadeveon Clowney, but he's got to be damn near close. I mean, he's the type of dude that if you run the ball at him, you're going to be in trouble. If you run the ball away from him, he's fast enough to run it down. And he's just a menace from a pass rushing perspective. He's down to LSU in Texas, supposedly. I don't know if anybody really knows, but I feel like if you follow recruiting and at all, that you probably realize he's down to LSU in Texas. I think he's the type of player that'd be a huge get for anybody. I mean, if he went to Georgia, he would be a huge get for Georgia. And Georgia's obviously got a loaded roster. Same thing with Alabama. He's just that type of generational type talent, I feel like. that's a huge get for anybody. So whoever gets Colin Simmons between LSU and Texas is getting a damn good player and is getting instant pass rush. If you're very familiar with college football, which if you're listening to this, I hope you are, you realize pass rush is finding elite pass rushers at the high school level that can translate to college football. That might be one of the toughest things to judge, because most of these kids are just physically ridiculous. They outmatch everybody physically, and they won't necessarily do that in college. Even if they are physically better in college, they're still going to have technique and things like that. And Colin Simmons is very advanced as a pass rusher. You go back and you go look at some of his highlights. I mean, he's doing things that professional defensive ends do. He's got a really good dip move. He's got great hips, great fluidity from top to bottom. The dude is he's elite. So we'll just leave it at that. He's elite. I think if you really look between LSU and Texas, who this would be a bigger get for, I think he'd be a bigger get for Texas. Texas has struggled pretty badly from a pass rush perspective for a pretty long time. It's been I think Barron Sorrell is a guy that can be one of those dominant pass rushers. He hasn't done it yet, but he had a really good season last year, 5.5 sacks. I think he's a guy that's starting to get it, starting to come into his own physically, but also picking up the mental side of the game, the mental side of being a pass rusher, the technique side of being a pass rusher. But even still, all the pressure that Texas has been able to produce, and they produced a ton last year, led the country in QB pressures last season. Not a lot of sacks. They sacked the quarterback 27 times last year, which I think was top 40 in the country. I looked it up a couple weeks ago. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it's top 40. Not terrible. There were 11 schools with 40 or more. And I think that's where you want to be. I think if you want to say you got an elite pass rush as a team, you're getting 40 sacks, really high upper 30s. And they just haven't been that. And even with all that pressure, a lot of that pressure did not come off the edge. And I think if you look at Texas, that's where and Steve Sarkisian's got to know this too, because if you look at all his recruiting classes at Texas, they're really defensive end heavy. They're really trench heavy. Lots of offensive linemen, lots of defensive linemen. But I think Colin Simmons, man, if he chooses Texas and stays with that commit and ends up signing with Texas, I think he's a guy that can instantly step on the field and provide them with a dangerous pass rush. So Colin Simmons is going to announce at 2 p.m. Central Time, August 10th. That's Thursday. He was originally set to announce in December, but there was a whole bunch of buzz after his official visit to Texas this summer and leading up to his LSU visit for the Bayou Splash. I think that's what they call it. That might move up some. And man, it moved up a lot. It moved up to August 10th. I think a lot's being made of the timing of this and the date specifically. His teammate Caden Durham, who was on that Bayou Splash visit, who's been offered by LSU, really good running back, 4-star running back out of Duncanville, is pretty much an LSU lock. He's also announcing on the 10th. And so I think a lot of people, without knowing what the significance of the 10th really is, they've made up their own significance, and that's that Colin Simmons and Caden Durham are going to both announce they're going to LSU, and they may. But really what August 10th is Duncanville's media day. And I think probably the coaching staff, I think a lot of these high school coaches of these high-profile recruits are really trying to talk them into just, if you think go ahead and commit, so we don't have to deal with all this circus during the football season. And for some of these coaches, it's a whole lot of circus. There's a whole some of them, it's not just one guy that's a big circus. Some of these guys, some of these teams have a lot of D1 prospects, and Duncanville is one of those teams. It's been a really, really tough recruitment to read for everybody. This is probably, I'm sure it's happened before, but to my knowledge, at least Texas being involved in a recruitment like this is definitely the most open-ended, weird, like nobody really knows what the hell is going to happen recruitment that Texas has been involved in. Maybe like Ryan Perilou, who pulled a fast one late against Texas. But for a long time, early this year, Colin Simmons was seen as just an LSU lean, and that's just the way it was going to be. Probably going into last year, he's an LSU lean. A lot of guys, a lot of the national recruiting guys saying, I'll be surprised if he doesn't end up at LSU. Obviously, a lot of time at that point. People can make up ground. So I think people kind of, especially Texas fans, we kind of just drew back from his recruitment, didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. And then all of a sudden he takes this official visit to Texas. And on that official visit, Texas had a lot of 5-star and really high 4-star recruits together. And apparently they made a really big impression on Colin Simmons. Immediately after that, you started hearing rumblings, man, Texas thinks they made up a lot of ground. And you started seeing some of these recruiting analysts putting in crystal balls for for Colin Simmons to go to Texas. Which for me personally, like roped me right back into this recruitment. I'm sure for most Texas fans that was the case. And then there was this big Bayou splash, which was an unofficial visit for Colin Simmons. But it's like the thing now. If you're in an area where it's cool to go swimming, which anywhere in Louisiana, Texas, anywhere in the South, of course, in July, it's cool to go swimming. It's hot as hell outside. I live in the panhandle of Texas, and it has been 100 degrees, probably 100 degrees or more, probably 90% of this summer. So you're damn right. Let's have a swimming party. So A&M has a swimming party. LSU has a swimming party. Simmons is at this Bayou splash with his teammate, Caden Durham. And then, right out of that, it just goes completely silent. Nobody is saying anything. Nobody has a good read on stuff. I think the LSU staff and maybe their insiders felt at that point like, yeah, I think we're in good shape now with Colin Simmons. But nothing really changed from a crystal ball perspective. Nobody was coming out and saying, yeah, we think this or yeah, we think that. And I think that's just because Colin Simmons has kept this so close to the vest. He just is not letting anybody know what's really going on. Steve Wiltfong's had a crystal ball in for LSU for a very long time. He comes on Horns 247 occasionally and writes a little, update or just anything new he can provide. I think a lot of times he'll do these threads where they're like multi-site threads. I think it was him that did one of those recently on Colin Simmons. And he said he felt like Texas made up some ground on their official visit, but he didn't feel like there was anything major enough for him to change his thoughts. And Steve Wiltfong, he'll be the first to tell you he gets them wrong, and he does. He got one wrong like a few days ago. It happens. You never know what these kids are going to do. Mike Roach, who's a guy that was on Horns 247 as a recruiting analyst. We've had him on the show before a few times. He's a national guy now. He was leaning LSU for a long time as well. But the funny thing, just a few minutes ago, he put in a crystal ball for Texas with a 4 confidence. 4. His scale is 1 to 10, I'm assuming. A lot of these guys will put in 60% or whatever. He put in a 4. So I don't know. He mentioned a few days ago that he thought he heard something that made him wonder. So I don't know. And the crazy thing about this is I think, you listen to the insiders. So these guys, these recruiting guys, they're just talking to guys. They have sources with the athletic department, sources on the coaching staffs. I'm sure over time they probably build relationships with family members, things like that. I know Mike, I don't know about Steve, but I know Mike goes to a lot of camps or used to, at least, all over Texas, checking out players, rating players, all that good stuff, talking to players, talking to their families. So they have these sources, right? And I think both sides of this deal feel so confident that the analysts have no idea. I think part of me says, regardless of which hat he picks on Thursday, and right now, folks, I feel like it's an LSU Texas battle with a Miami on the side. I don't think Miami. I think they're going to be on the table, but I don't feel like they're in any kind of position to actually get this commitment on Thursday. How wild would it be if everybody's talking LSU Texas and he puts a damn Miami hat on? Anyway, I think regardless of what hat he puts on Thursday, part of me feels like we haven't seen the end of this recruiting saga. We haven't seen the end of this recruiting battle. And you look at LSU, they're a preseason top 5 team in the coaches poll. You look at Texas, and there's a whole lot of hype around Texas this year. A lot of people are saying, Texas could make the playoff this year. Texas could, Texas should win the Big 12 easily. Texas is a 10 or 11 win team easily. They get past Bama, who knows what might happen to Texas. Some of those things I've said. So both teams have an opportunity, have a roster, have the expectation that there's going to be big seasons. I think a guy that maybe commits in July, August, he's doing what he feels like is right at that time. But I mean, what if he chooses LSU? LSU falls flat on their face this season, and Texas just kicks ass, winds up in the college football playoff, wins the Big 12, goes on the road, beats Bama. That kind of stuff's hard to ignore, and especially when you look at, I don't know Colin Simmons from Adam. I don't know anything about him whatsoever, but I know a lot of people, especially the younger generation today, very, very short attention span. It's very much, what have you done for me lately? So I think he legit likes both of these programs. I think just because he picks one or the other on Thursday does not mean that ultimately the other school doesn't win his commitment, or possibly even a school that's not even in the mix right now. The other side of me says, and Colin Simmons said this just a few days ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, he wants to get his commitment out of the way and build a recruiting class around him. He wants other 5-star players to go play with him. And if that's the case, it's hard to imagine that this isn't it for him, because it'd be really hard to build a recruiting class if you're wishy-washy all the way up into signing day in December. My prediction, man, I know less than any of these recruiting guys who know a lot, right? I mean, these guys are plugged in and they don't even have a freaking clue. I'll say Texas, man. I feel like Colin Simmons, and this is not Thursday. This is ultimately, like, this is who he signs with. I feel like he's going to sign with Texas. He's a Texas boy. I think he likes Austin. He wants to get into business. The business school at the University of Texas is second to none. I think the opportunity for him to get on the field very quickly and have an impact very quickly, I think that opportunity is bigger at Texas. You know, Steve Sarkisian and his staff have only been there a couple years, but already in that 2 years, they've developed a lot of talent. They've turned some guys that weren't. They've turned some guys that were talented, but weren't doing it, weren't putting in the work, into guys that can go out in the field and produce and get looks from the NFL. Not to say that Brian Kelly and his staff at LSU can't do that. So that's my prediction. We're going to say Texas. We're going to actually have a show on Thursday. I don't know exactly what time it'll be. It might be going on right when that announcement happens. So I might be watching out of one corner of my eye what Colin Simmons does, which, by the way, it's going to be streaming live. I believe it's streaming live on 3 and 247 Sports, which I'm pretty sure you can find both of those on YouTube. Conference realignment. Conference realignment's been a big topic lately. Rightfully so. Colorado says, we're out, Big Pac-12. We're going back to the Big 12. And the Pac-12 basically implodes within a week. You got Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado all headed to the Pac-12. We talked about the crazy nature of that last Thursday. By the way, we'll be doing more shows every week headed forward into football season and through football season. It's just too much content. The shows get too long. I'd honestly like to be able to do one show a day. I just don't know if I have the time for that. I do still have a real job. Oregon, Washington are headed out to the Big Ten. And so the Pac-12 is just on life support. And it's really interesting how the Big 12 outmaneuvered the Pac-12. You know, what was it, 2010? You had Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, all getting ready to jump ship to the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 couldn't get the deal done. I think part of that was Texas deciding they would stay in the Big 12. But either way, the Pac-12 just couldn't get it done. And you would think, I mean, if you look at the Big 12 back then, those were some of the biggest names in the Big 12 at the time. Nebraska had kind of already fallen off a little bit. Colorado hadn't been good in a while. Missouri's way on the other side of the country. You know, Missouri had been playing pretty well, sort of leading up to 2010. Kansas had a run or so, but they were still Kansas. Regardless, the Pac-12 just couldn't get it done. And then fast forward to what, 2020, 2021. And everybody thought the Big 12 was going to be dead. because Texas and OU had announced they're moving to the SEC. And so the remaining Big 12 schools even thought, like, man, we got to figure out a place to go. The Big 12's going away. Texas Tech trying to get back into the Pac-12 again. Oklahoma State maybe trying to get back into the Pac-12 again. And again, the Pac-12, I think the Pac-12 this time just straight up said there's no value to adding those schools. Which at the time may be 100% true. I've dogged on the Big 12 so much. The Big 12 has created its own problems. And at the time when everybody thought the Big 12 was doomed, I said, man, they created all of this just with poor leadership, just a lack of like vision of the future. And my God, the Pac-12 was so bad at those things that the Big 12 is now swooped in and stole 4 of their teams. The other 2 big names, Oregon and Washington, jump into the Big 10 to follow USC and UCLA. It's almost like when UCLA and USC said we're moving to the Big 10, the Pac-12 did nothing. They just sat there. And they legitimately thought, they were gonna be able to make it through this somehow. Which is odd because, man, the Pac-12 has just never had a lot of excitement. I mean, the only time the Pac-12 has been really exciting in my adult life, I'll just say that, I don't remember a whole lot that was going on when I was a kid, but in my adult life, when USC was going for a three-peat, all kinds of hullabaloo about the Pac-12. Fair enough. Oregon, when Oregon was really good, when Chip Kelly was the coach, all kinds of hullabaloo about the Pac-12. But outside of that, the Pac-12 has to have that. The Pac-12 has to have teams that are competing at a very high level nationally for anybody to care about the Pac-12. And it's not necessarily their fault. They're on the West Coast. People on the East Coast are going to bed when Pac-12 games start. And so there's just not a lot of exposure. And I don't think the Pac-12 did anything to try to mitigate any of that. And now you got Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State kind of left there holding their cocks like, what do we do? And the funniest thing about those 4 schools is I have not seen anything. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I have not seen a peep in the media from those 4 schools. You would think there'd be something. You would think they'd be floating like fake news to get them involved in discussions or something. But nothing that I'm aware of. And so right now, those are the Pac-12. And I mean, no offense to either one of those schools, but nobody gives a shit about watching those schools play football. Cal should probably just fold up sports. I don't think their student body gives a damn about any kind of sports. I don't think their faculty gives a damn about any kind of sports. I just think the culture at Cal is just not that type of culture. I think some of these players that play at Stanford, and Stanford has had some good football years, some good baseball years, some good basketball years. They are up there in that President's Cup constantly because they play like these West Coast sports like water polo and men's volleyball and just stuff most schools don't play, but they're sanctioned by the NCAA. But I think most of their athletes go there for the education, and that's fair enough. It's one of the best institutions in the country for academics. And I think if you folded up their athletic programs, I think a lot of those kids would still go to Stanford just because of the education. And then you got Oregon State and Washington State, who I just don't think anybody cares about watching that. I mean, sure, they'll have their moments. Oregon State beats Florida last year. Washington State does something some year. I mean, I'm not saying they're dead programs, but from a business perspective, they certainly don't add a lot of value. And I just don't think they have the type of fan bases to support what those schools need to be considered valuable to a new conference. So I think there's one of two things that can happen here. Either the Pac-12 pulls in some Mountain West teams and remains the Pac-12, or those 4 teams join the Mountain West Conference, or maybe, and I don't know how this works, maybe someone swoops in and starts a new conference and gobbles all. I don't know. I don't know what's going down with Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State, but I know it's not good. And they seemingly don't care. I told you guys a while back, I got on Twitter just recently. I've looked at Twitter before, and man, I'm going to really make myself look like a dumbass, but it's just not intuitive the way the responses are. And like, you get a response in your mentions or whatever, like in your notifications, and you have no idea what they're responding to. And I don't know how to, other than to go to my profile and look through everything I've posted or retweeted or requoted or whatever the fuck it is now, because it's X and not Twitter anymore. I don't know how to find that. So if anybody knows how to find that, please let me know. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to X or Twitter or whatever and shoot me a message, man. I need to know. I need to know how to find out what people are responding to. But scrolling through Twitter is some good times, man. You can get lost scrolling through Twitter. And some of the stuff that's come up, some of these storylines because of realignment, this latest round of realignment have just been amazing. Like, number one, Utah instantly is the most hated fan base in the new Big 12. I mean, it's not even close. I don't know exactly why. I think part of it was because Utah, as soon as Colorado announced they were coming to the Big 12 again, there's all these rumors flying around about, Utah and Arizona, or maybe Utah and Oregon joining the Big 12. And Utah fans were just flat out against it, like openly against it on Twitter. They did not. I mean, they turned their noses up. They started making comments about how they would dominate the Big 12 instantly. And I don't think it sat well with a lot of the I don't want to call them legacy, because too many people are saying that, the legacy Big 12 members. I don't know. That just sounds weird to me. The original Big 12 members, let's put it that way. The ones that are still left: Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Baylor. And I guess you could include TCU. TCU's been in the Big 12 for a good enough time. I think you could consider them, part of that group. Certainly did not like the fact that Utah thought they were better than them. And then you had fans on Utah side that were saying, we'd never go to the Big 12. We're going to wait till the Big 10 asks us to join, and we're premier. And listen, man, Utah's got a pretty decent football program. They have for a while now. They're back-to-back Pac-12 champions. So they got a pretty decent program, but I think they got a little too big for their britches. And man, it's funny. I saw a tweet or a X or a Zeet or whatever the hell they're called now that said Utah has officially replaced Texas as the most hated Big 12 team. And I just started laughing because it's true. Another storyline we got is lost rivals. And this is like probably the only thing I've heard out of those 4 schools we just talked about. And it's not all 4 of them, but there's this whole narrative that because schools aren't in the same conference, that they can't continue rivalries. And I didn't understand it when A&M left for the SEC. I don't understand it now when Washington is gone and the Apple Cup with Washington State is seemingly up in the air. I don't understand it with the Civil War, with Oregon State and Oregon not being in the same conference going forward. Red River Shootout has been played 118 times. 76% of those games have been played with Oklahoma and Texas not being in the same conference. So there is no reason in the world why Bedlam can't continue to happen. Let me back up. There's no good reason in the world why Bedlam cannot continue to happen, why the Apple Cup cannot continue to happen, while the Civil War cannot continue to happen. There's no good reason in the world why the Lone Star Showdown between Texas A&M and Texas ever had to stop. It's all hurt feelings and bullshit that stop that stuff. So don't buy into this whole, oh, we're not in the same conference anymore, we can't play each other crap. Because the last time I looked, there's at least 3 non-conference games on people's schedules. There's no reason in the world that those two universities can't get together and have a plan on how to move forward with their rivalries if they want to. But the problem is one team feels slighted, and so they act like fucking children. And you go 11 plus years, 12 plus years without playing one of the biggest rivalries, supposedly college football. I think another interesting storyline is college realignment is killing college football. And to me, I think that depends on what you mean. If you're talking about like the sanctity of college football and what people my age grew up looking at and really being excited about college football for, then man, that's been on life support for a long time now. That went on life support the second the transfer portal got thrown out there with very little rules. The second this whole NIL started happening with none rules, basically. That's when that game of college football went on life support and got killed or got ruined or whatever you want to say. The games will go on regardless of where these teams reside from a conference perspective. You're just going to get different games. You know, college football has gone from very much a regional affair to a national business. So it's the business of college football that's killing college football. And I get it, man. Football, it's a big business. I get it, man. These schools are making tons of, well, and that's another misnomer. Like, most of these schools aren't making a ton of money. Most of these schools, even the ones that have really successful football programs, all that money goes to break even for the athletic department for all the other shitty programs that nobody wants to come out and support, that they can't sell tickets for, that they can't sell merchandise for, that they can't get on TV because nobody cares. There are very few athletic departments that make money. Profit. And so the ones that do have got it in their minds, they want to go make more money. And what can we do to put ourselves in a better position to go make more money? And the ones that can't do that get all salty because they can't do it on their own. And when schools that can do it on their own leave them or move on or whatever you want to call it, they get pissy about it because it's about money. It's like what if you get married to a really rich, beautiful woman, you get accustomed to that lifestyle, you get accustomed to her really providing for the family, and then all of a sudden she decides, I don't want to be here anymore. you're going to feel pissed off that, man, I'm losing all this money. I mean, you might love her too, but financially, you're in trouble. There's already momentum building, and I totally predicted this the second. The very first tweet I did, tweet, twat, Twitterling, whatever it is now, the very first one I did after I saw a tweet that said CU has accepted their invitation to the Big 12, and it's literally like 5 seconds after I saw it. How long before people start blaming this? How long before people start blaming the Pac-12 demise on Texas? As a joke, right? But sure as shit, there's like legit momentum building behind that narrative that Texas ruined college football, you guys. By the way, Colorado is now joining their third conference, making an affiliation with their third conference in 14 years. It's Texas. It's Texas that ruined college football. Unnecessary roughnesses. Casey Smith says Texas caused all this with the Longhorn Network. So a deal that got signed in 2011 by apparently like an irrelevant. I mean, if you listen to these people talk, Texas is irrelevant. Texas has been irrelevant for anywhere from 10 to 20 years, according to the knowledgeable people in the college football world. Somehow, this university that's been irrelevant for 10 to 20 years completely destroyed college football in a 12-year span by not going anywhere. Casey Smith's an Aggie, by the way. So it's not shocking that she would put her foot firmly in her mouth and say something really stupid because she's upset about Texas all the time. That's what A&M, that's what Aggies do. They wake up every single morning and they immediately get upset about Texas. And then they say a bunch of dumb shit about Texas. And then they go to bed and then they wake up and they do the whole thing all over again. That's every single day. There's 5 inconvenient truths about the Texas ruined everything narrative. 1, Texas was not the first to leave the Southwest Conference or the Big 12. 2, LHN played no role in Colorado or Nebraska leaving the Big 12. Those schools announced in June of 2010 that they were leaving. The Longhorn Network deal was not signed until January 19th, 2011, and didn't come into existence until July or August of 2011. 3, Texas A&M had been flirting with the SEC since 1990s when Arkansas left. Texas A&M has always seen themselves as a better cultural fit, better academic fit in the SEC than they ever did the Southwest Conference or the Big 12. And they finally used the uncertainty of the Pac-12 expansion back in the 2010, 2011 timeframe to announce their move to the SEC. 4, Texas pitched a Texas network to A&M before the Longhorn Network was ever a serious consideration, and A&M didn't want to do it. 5, ESPN offered Texas $300 million to do Longhorn Network and built them state-of-the-art studio facilities for their students because ESPN saw that kind of value in Texas. So there's your 5 reasons that the narrative is stupid. Let's talk about them a little bit. Texas wasn't the first to leave the Southwest Conference. No shit. Arkansas left to join the SEC. 4 teams left the Big 12 before Texas and Oklahoma ultimately decided they were going to move on from the Big 12. Colorado and Nebraska left the Big 12 because they were tired of getting their asses kicked by everybody in the Big 12. And they probably went and made more money in the Pac-12 and the Big 10. So the same exact reason that they hate Texas for being greedy is the reason they left the conference in the first place. Was Texas supposed to turn down $300 million from the Longhorn Network? If someone walked up to you, let's say you are a part of a 12-man team at work, and the various members of this 12-man team provide different value for the team, but ultimately the team still continues to do well. The team produces. The team, gets along. Everybody, it's not perfect, right? But it's functional. And everybody kind of knows where they sit in that hierarchy on that team. And there's clearly members of that team that provide more value for that team than others. But it works, right? They're a team. Imagine you're that, and you're one of those top performers on that team. And another team comes to you from inside the organization. Say you work for Xerox. Say you work for Xerox. And another team within Xerox comes to you and says, hey, man, why don't you come join our team? We're going to give you $300 million. And we're going to like spruce up your desk area, give you some better computer equipment. Who's not doing that? If ESPN went to any of these other schools and said, we want to give you $300 million to let us build some really kick-ass studio shit on your campus that you can use for your students, we're basically going to create a school of broadcast journalism at your school that's going to have the best equipment there can be, and we're going to pay you $300 million to do it. Tell me any one of those schools is going to turn that down. This whole idea that Texas was greedy to accept the Longhorn Network deal is the most fucking retarded thing I have ever heard in my life. It just doesn't make sense. It holds no water. The only reason people are mad about it is because they didn't get asked to have their own network. And the reason they didn't get asked is because ESPN did not see that type of value in their program. That's not Texas's fault. That's a you problem. That's a you problem, Texas Tech. That's a you problem, Texas A&M. I mean, Oklahoma fans hate Texas like more than anything on the planet. Oklahoma fans wouldn't piss on Texas fans if they were on fire. And they don't piss and moan about the Longhorn Network. You know why? Because they've got their own value too. They focus on how can I continue to build my brand, not, oh, I'm so behind and it sucks so bad because someone else is really good at something. Someone else is valuable and I'm not. This whole idea that Texas has ruined anything is just so laughably stupid. I mean, again, folks, Texas is irrelevant. So which one is it? Is Texas irrelevant for the last 10 to 20 years? Or is Texas like this diabolical, evil, has a lair somewhere and just hatching out plans to fuck up everybody else? Which one is it? Pick something. Better yet, just move on. Get Texas out of your mouth. Jealousy does not look good on y'all. Preseason coaching poll. Man, I hate preseason polls at all. And I think a lot of that goes back to, when we had the Bowl Alliance and the BCS, and, it was almost like, only 2 teams could play for the national championship back then, and only 8 teams were going to make it to some of these upper tier bowls, right? So in a lot of cases, where you were ranked preseason kind of had a pretty big outcome on whether you had an opportunity to reach one of those BCS bowls and play in the national championship. We saw lots of undefeated teams that didn't get an opportunity to play in BCS national championships because there were already 2 undefeated, in some cases, 1-loss teams that were highly, highly ranked to start the season and had all the hype going into the season. So I think that's part of why I do not like preseason polls. The other reason is they're just, how do you know? I mean, I know these guys got to do something. I'm not like totally against it. I just, they don't have a lot of utility. All it's really for is to give somebody a chance to give their opinion on who they think the top 25 teams in the country are. And then it gives all the fans something to argue about for a couple weeks before the football season really kicks off, which I guess is valuable, especially today. Like that's kind of the culture. I see the same people over and over again on Twitter just getting into arguments all day long. So I get it. It like drives like what do you call it drives interaction, which is a big deal on social media. So I get it. But I think, just generally they're completely useless, like tits on a hog. They're just not tits on a boar hog. They're just not, who gives a shit? But anyway, we're going to talk about it a little bit. Coaches poll comes out the other day. It's not a whole lot on here. Again, I don't know how you really look at this and have too much of a problem, or I don't know how you say, man, this is perfect, and I don't know how you say this is bullshit. But there are a couple things on here that I felt like are maybe they're interesting to me, like surprises, I guess. One is LSU ranked in the top 5. I mean, I get it. I know they have the greatest quarterback room that's ever been conceived in the history of college football, apparently. But I mean, they went 10-4 last year, which is good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not hating on 10-4. Do you look? You look at their schedule, and like Tennessee absolutely bitch slapped them. And I think Tennessee was a pretty good team last year, especially offensively. But you can't get your ass smacked like that, have a 10-4 season, and then have those types of expectations, I guess, because that's really what the polls are. They're what a group of people's expectations are. And, their biggest win, and it was a good win. Don't get me wrong, they beat Alabama in OT, and Alabama had a good football team last year, but it was probably the worst Alabama team in several years. For Alabama and Nick Saban standards, Alabama struggled last year mightily. They lost a few games, and then, there was a couple other games that they could have just as easily lost. So I think LSU at 5 is just kind of interesting. I mean, I think I would probably have them in the top, and I don't know, like top definitely the top half of the top 25. So maybe 13 on into 1, something like that. Again, you're splitting hairs. I think Tennessee ranked in the top 10 is kind of interesting to me. Again, they had a really good season last year. But they lost Hendon Hooker, they lost Cedric Tillman, and they lost Jalen Hyatt. That's a shit ton of production right there offensively. And that's what Tennessee's offense is what made Tennessee last year. I mean, when you win games like 50-something to 40-something, there's not a lot of defense going on. And bless their hearts, they were super fired up about going and playing Georgia. And their freaking defense folded like a cheap tent against Georgia. I mean, that defense gave up like 400 yards per game last year. And I know things change and people can get better. I don't know how you say, man, Tennessee had a really good season last year. I think most other teams that lost what they lost are not getting top 10 consideration. Again, these are just things that, I mean, I'm trying to be nitpicky, really, because I don't give a shit because it's a preseason poll. Texas at 12. I don't know. I honestly don't give a damn. I mean, every year people complain. Texas fans complain about either they're ranked too highly or they're not ranked high enough going into the season. And to me, you look at their schedule, they're going to play 6 other teams that are ranked in the top 25. I believe it's 6. Let's see. We got Alabama, Kansas State, TCU, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. Maybe it's 5 teams. 5 teams they're going to play next year that are right here in this top 25. If they just go out and take care of business, they could be ranked 98th right now, and they're going to be ranked in the top 10 by the time all that's said and done. So I don't give a shit where Texas is ranked necessarily to start the season. I think the potential is there for the roster is loaded. It's the first time in a long time that they've had really good depth at every position on this roster. The coaching staff has been there for 2 years. This is year 3. They've got, I mean, every single day you see so-and-so is on the Biletnikoff list, or so-and-so is on the Mackey list, or so-and-so is on the Bronco Nagurski list. Like they're on every watch list you can possibly think of. So he's got the players. He's got the continuity in the coaching staff. You know, they should finish the season 12 or better. So again, I'm okay with it. That's the show for tonight. Check us out on Thursday at some point, and I'll tweet it out when it's going to be. I was doing them early in the afternoon. I might have to do it sort of evening-ish like we're doing tonight. Thursday, we're going to talk about the DB room at Texas. We've been going through, talking about all the position groups. We'll talk about the DBs. We've also been talking about all the opponents leading up to this 2023 season. Week 8, U of H. Another sort of renewal of an old rivalry, right? Old Southwest Conference rivalry. Dana Holgerson, the madman, he'll probably be half drunk during that game. I'm going to try to get some guests on the show some more, man. I know I say that a lot, but I did reach out to Kyle Umlang, and if I butchered your name, I apologize, Kyle. I'd like to get him on and talk some analytics, dig in a little more on what Kyle is. And then outside of that, we'll just talk about whatever the hell I want. I mean, something's bound to happen between now and Thursday for college football. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Check me out. Subscribe, like, follow, whatever it is. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em.